Hey, good afternoon. Stephen Priest at class1modelworks.com. And today we're going to talk about the GSC flat car loads that we produce. These are available for pre-order. There's actually two things here. There's loads and then the GSC flat cars themselves. They'll come separately, but they were designed to work together, or the loads will work with as just standard detail parts from down the rear, or of course can be loaded on other flat cars. So today we're going to talk about some interesting things. We're going to talk about, since the cars and the loads come separately, we want to talk about how we amalgamate those into a load. In other words, how we combine the two to create a load, and how we tie it down in a prototypical manner. So here, this car right here, this is one of the earlier test models, and you'll notice that one of the things about the car is that obviously these cars were great for high and wide loads. And so the load itself overhangs on the sides of the car just a little bit, and of course it's an extremely high load. And one of the reasons that the railroads chose these cars is because they had this drop deck or this drop bed in them that allowed taller loads to be shipped. But I want to talk to you first on this about tying it down, tying the load down. One of the neat things about the GSC cars is they were designed specifically for this kind of load. So if you look at the decks on these cars, there's holes everywhere on the deck to tie things down, to put all kinds of stakes, ribbing, and posts and things like that. And so we're going to concentrate on how we created the model to tie loads down. So when you purchase these loads from us, included in the package is going to be piano wire, or excuse me, floral wire. And this is a packet here of floral wire. And basically what it is, it's a really fine wire that is easily bent and holds its shape. So with a pair of nippers or pliers, you can go in and bend this and end up with a shape that holds. And what we do with that is we will run it through openings in the load, just like the prototype railroads or prototype shippers would have, and then we run it through holes in the deck. And these holes in the deck were specifically designed and built by GSC for the purpose of holding loads down. And it doesn't matter how you load it, it doesn't matter what holes you run through. Every load that was ever shipped was probably, the lading or the load was probably held down differently, different methods through different holes, as long as they were secured, and obviously the load isn't going to go rolling off into the ditch somewhere when the train's underway. So this large wheel here, or this large dewatering drum, is held in place on both ends by 4 pieces of what would have been either rebar or steel bar in the prototype. And of course, both ends of that are treated exactly the same, with the same type of treatment and the X bracing for stability. And that's generally how things were tied down. The next load I want to talk about a little bit is this transformer load. These were very high dollar loads, very expensive to purchase, and of course were another type of lading or load that the GSC flat cars were very, very adept at handling. That's in some ways why they were built. These loads are held a little differently. The holes are out on the end decks for this, and you can drill those to the deck. You'll see location or locator pins to drill. By the way, this is exactly what the prototype did. They would go out and they would drill holes in the deck and then feed the large steel rod through and bend it over on the end, heat it up and bend it over on the end, or they would thread it and put a large pair of nuts on it that they would then tighten against each other so they wouldn't unthread. So in this particular car, in this particular load, again, these loads come with the floral wire, so you don't have to go purchase that. It'll be in the kit with the load. Up on the load itself, there's actually fixtures up above here that the floral wire will fit into to create the lading point, or the tie-down point, which is, so it's relatively easy to do, but taking a little bit of extra time to tie those down creates that extra leap in the accuracy and the realism and, frankly, the interesting appearance of the car. So another load that we've got is this turbine, or this big pump load. And this load, unlike the others, had large welded pipe on it. And so this load will actually come with this large pipe as part of the load. So literally this just drops right onto the deck, and those pipes are situated and set up at the correct angles and everything to fit right onto the car and basically look fantastic. The only thing I did with this is I painted the load a kind of a green gray. It comes in a light gray, like kind of a primer gray, and then I weathered or painted the pipes here a rust color, because they would not have really cared if these rusted during the trip or whatever, since they're temporarily just used to hold the load in place. So the difference in color here kind of offsets and makes the load look more interesting. But indeed, this is actually all cast as one piece. So the final quote-unquote load I want to talk to you about is something that I came up with in my shop, but is something that's very realistic and common on these cars. As these cars carried loads repeatedly over time, what happened is as the old loads were removed and the steel was cut off, the steel that was being used to hold the load in place, angles, I-beams, H-columns, and things like that. What happened is they'd just go in with a cut-off or a grind-off wheel and just either torch cut or grind off basically the myriad of different shapes used to fix or hold the load in place. So you would end up with a deck that looks like this, that has all kinds of cut off, torch cut off, and ground off fixtures on it that were generally pretty rusty because they weren't painted. And so if you want to model a car that has been around for a while, just go and get some styrene shapes, glue them onto the deck anywhere. They can be glued any place, because you have no idea what kind of load these cars were carrying. And they should generally be fairly short. You don't want anything really tall, because of course they were cut off later on. And then once you've affixed those to the deck, just go back in there with your airbrush and a little bit of rust colored paint and paint around on that deck a little bit, and you'll end up with a really good looking empty deck that hints at a history, that kind of shows that over time it was doing things. It was hauling different shipments and loads. We all know it's just a model and it never did that, but the idea is to provide this car with a past, an imaginary past, or an insinuated past. You can also use some really thin strap styrene, which I have here, that looks like banding. Very often the loads on these decks would also be held on with banding, or again you can use some of that floral wire to create that. So that's about it for today. Really neat cars. You can do a lot of interesting things with them. Hey, to let you know also, one of the things we're doing is we have what's called the Loaded Bundle giveaway. So we're basically giving away 2 of these cars and all 4 loads. And one of the neat things is you get to choose what 2 cars you can basically get with your giveaway from any that are in stock. So just right down here at the link, click on the link, and that'll take you to the giveaway for a chance to win 2 of these cars and all 4 loads. And another really neat thing is if you want to guarantee that you get these cars, you probably should go pre-order, because several of them have already sold out and we're getting relatively low stock on a lot of the others. So if you want to make sure that you secure a couple of these for your railroad, go and pre-order now at class1modelworks.com.